นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังกุณุตรังอุปัชฌายังนะมัสสามิ So I'm asking us to talk about the Buddhist approach to global economic crisis. This, in some respects, is somewhat out of my range of expertise, as I haven't touched money for 30 years. But I would like just to share with you, to begin with, an idea of how I approach such a topic, or any topic. So if I'm given statement like this, or a subject, I will ask myself questions like, is there a global economic crisis? And then I will say, no, there's no global economic crisis. And then I'll argue with myself. I'll set up that position in my mind and say there's no global economic crisis, and try and find ways to support that position. Or then I say, well, there is a global economic crisis, but it's not a bad thing. Or it is a bad thing. Or it's a bad thing, generally a bad thing, but maybe with some good results. Or it's basically a good thing with some bad results. It's what we think it is. It's not what we think it is. It's worse than we think it is. It's better than we think it is. It's going to get worse. It's going to get better. And just bringing up a whole host of positions like this to look at that topic from various angles, many of which I may not agree with, but as a way of stimulating some reflection which is not just going to fall into the old ruts, or just to correspond to my usual ways of thinking about issues. And I found that this is very useful and creative kind of approach. So, I mean, there's something that comes up immediately in my mind. I just brought these questions up right now. I haven't really thought about this before, but I would say that there is always a global economic crisis. And there is a global economic crisis for how many billions of people who are living on $1 a day. You know, that the lives of perhaps half of the people on this planet is an economic crisis from their childhood for the whole of their lives. So when we look at what we call the global economic crisis right now, then we can step back from that and see, well, that's within the context of a larger general struggle for survival and well-being of people all around the world. Now, if we're speaking about a particular Buddhist approach, I think it has to be recognized also that not being a dogmatic religion in the same way as the faith-based religions that grew up in the Middle East are dogmatic religions, then it's not necessarily the case that there is a specific, clear-cut Buddhist view on contemporary phenomena, because given certain basic principles, think that it's possible to derive different conclusions from them. And so I think as Buddhists we're a little bit hesitant to proclaim particular political, social programs as being the Buddhist way of running a society or an economy. Having said that, there are a number of passages in the suttas in which the Buddha dealt with economic matters, and the Buddha, for instance, spoke about the importance of the king or the monarch subsidizing or providing funds for farmers and for poor people. And so you could say from that in a modern context, then this is a Buddhist argument for an interventionist state, but I'm sure that that's wouldn't be universally agreed upon by Buddhists. I think that the Buddha did recognize that one of the most destabilizing features of a society is a large disparity of wealth. So when you have very wealthy people and very poor people in a society, when the gap between the rich and the poor is very wide, then you will almost always find a lot of crime and social disturbance. And of course this is consistent with the findings of many research projects over the past, 50 years, that the most stable countries in the world are the Scandinavian countries, which are characterized by a very small disparity of wealth between the richest and the poorest. So if you, for instance, compare the wages of a CEO and the wages of an ordinary worker and see how many times more the CEO makes than the ordinary worker, then even in the in Britain and America, which are the tooth and claw capitalist countries, raw capitalist countries, you've seen this huge increase in the difference. Whereas in Scandinavia, there's still quite a small difference. And this, I think, does lead on to a Dhamma point, that it's not so much the income and the comfort and so on that's derived, and security that's derived from income which affects people. It's comparison, and we are beings, or ordinary unenlightened beings, constantly comparing oneself with others. And because very few people take the time and the effort to look within at the true nature of the mind and the body and the five khandhas, or however you want to refer to it, people don't know who they are. And so you seek for some idea of who you are by looking at the people around you and by making comparisons. So with material wealth and possessions, as someone who says, it's not enough that you have something. You also need for a lot of other people not to have it. So it's not the charm and the attraction of expensive goods is not in the physical, the real experience of that product alone, but in the fact that you feel that you are one of a small group, an elite or an elect group that has access to that product. So you see, it's not merely a matter of the five senses experiencing some comfort, some pleasure, but there is a mental dimension here. I am someone who can afford this. And of course, many business people know this, and so will make their product unnecessarily expensive, knowing that many people will buy something just because it is outstandingly expensive, just because they can, and to show to other people, I can afford this. Look at me. So much of modern life and consumption and dress and fashion and lifestyle is if it was all to be expressed in 3 words, is look at me. Yeah. So that's the kind of the shallowness of modern society. People having no real roots, foundations, and particularly no observation and insight into the true nature of their life, that they grasp onto things outside of themselves in order to give them a sense of solidity and reality, authenticity, meaning. And so the possession of certain goods is the modern way to position yourself and to give you some kind of spurious sense of being somebody. Now, we are this year, many people, of course, have found their lives in the world turned upside down by the economic crisis. Well, I think without being an expert by any means on economic matters, I would say, first of all, that from what I have studied, that this is no surprise. People who do know about these things, and I've spoken to some people who said this was very much on the cards for the last number of years. So in many ways we can say it's a classic case of the ostrich with his head in the sand, except it isn't. And I want to take this opportunity to let you know a very important fact and to just put the record straight here about ostriches, because and of all the studies done on the life of ostriches in the past 50 years, not a single scientist has ever found a single ostrich that ever buries its head in the sand. So I think that it's about time that we just did the right thing by ostriches and just make this very clear that they're much more intelligent than human beings, because human beings do put their heads in the sand and do just hope everything will work out. And the another contributory factor to this, and again I think here there is a clear Dhamma point, is that as Buddhists, we in a way we have what's called, I would call it a metta religion. Not metta as loving kindness, but metta in the sense of metta, something which is like a critique of religion. It's a religion which within itself contains a critique of other religions. And whereas in most religions faith is given the central the central role to play, and religions are defined by their set of beliefs. In Buddhism, we consider belief to be a tool, to be part of the training or part of the education process, but one which has a limited scope and one which must always be balanced by the wisdom faculty. Without that wisdom faculty balancing faith, faith becomes very easily, can become fanaticism, can become superstition. And faith in Buddhism must lead to right effort. This is the way that we know if we have faith. If we are applying ourselves to abandoning the unwholesome, developing the wholesome, purifying our minds, that is the measure of the extent to which we have faith in the Triple Gem. It's not just a matter of believing in things. Why? Because our basic faith and confidence as a Buddhist is in our capacity for enlightenment, our capacity, our ability to abandon the unwholesome, develop the wholesome, purify the mind. If we have that faith and we don't actually put it to the test, then it's not. We call it bad faith. It's not authentic faith because there's a lack of sincerity. If you feel that your life will have true meaning through abandoning the unwholesome, and you are confident that as a human being you have the capacity to do so, but you don't, then what kind of faith is that? So in Buddhism we're interested in understanding what is faith, what is its role, what role does it play, what is its relationship to other wholesome dhammas on the path, particularly effort, mindfulness, samadhi, wisdom. What are its limitations? What are the dangers? And we seek to understand it in order to make use of it. Now, through that kind of effort and that kind of investigation, we become aware of the nature of belief systems and the way in which the mind grasps at beliefs. And then we begin to see that this is not a process which is restricted to religious doctrines. We have a deep need or desire or craving to believe in things. And this is a strategy that unenlightened beings use to deal with existence, believing in things. So how many times we think, how possibly could somebody believe that, you know? How could they believe that? There is an extremely well-known and prominent Buddhist sect in Thailand, which teaches that if you are reborn in heaven, you will be decked with all kinds of beautiful ornaments and decorations which reflect directly the kinds of things that you've offered monks. So you get an ice cream ring on your hand and a papaya salad necklace. Now this is a doctrine of one of the most well-known and respected Buddhist sects in Thailand. So you think, how on earth can anybody possibly believe this? So I'm staying within the Buddhist fold. I'm not going outside of Buddhism for my examples here. This has been sort of a constant kind of koan or doubt in my mind since I was a child, with various belief systems. How is it possible that someone could believe that? And the answer I came to is a very simple one. It's because people want to believe it. If you want to believe something, you can believe anything, if you really want to. One of the belief systems and in many ways it's it was a dogma and has some of the characteristics of a religious belief, and one which is, I would say, a contributory factor to the present economic problems in the world, is the blind faith in markets. The blind faith in the self-regulatory nature of markets. A blind faith in something called trickle down. All these kinds of dogmas which were propounded in the churches of Harvard and Yale and all these places, which were gobbled wholesale and then spread around the world and became an orthodoxy and became a belief. And you ask, are they actually based on real life and what really happens in societies and economies? And I would suggest not. And now it's become much clearer. But we used to have some terrible crisis before we're willing to learn about things, and often it's too late. So the economic crisis doesn't mean that there's something suddenly gone wrong. Recessions, economic crises are just part of the whole system. They're built into the system. It's not something that's gone wrong. This is just the way this particular economic system works. And we shouldn't be surprised at that. And one of the major developments that took place about 30 years ago is characterized in England, at least in the critics of Mrs. Thatcher's government, as the idea that greed is good. And many people talk about this change in British society, and we say what we call the legitimization of greed. And I think that it's a real shame that as Buddhists, Buddhist scholars, Buddhist teachers have not been confident enough and articulate enough to come forward and to reject that idea that greed is good. And that part of it is this kind of defensiveness in the Buddhist community. We're afraid that they're going to look at us as being sort of backward and not contributing to national development and progress. And so, we have to say, yes, we're really all for this. It's just, we have perhaps a few reservations on the way. But the major contribution that I believe that Buddhists should be making and haven't made is this understanding of the twofold nature of desire. That there is desire, given the Pali name tanha, which is desire which arises from ignorance, this desire for the fruits of, or the results of action, and inevitably leads to suffering, both on personal and social level. And then there is chanda, which is a wholesome kind of desire which arises from knowledge, understanding, and is focused on the effort, the causal stage of development. So, because Western theory, Western psychology has not had the sophistication and the ability to distinguish two kinds of desire, it's lumped them all together and said basically that a society develops when you stimulate greed, and that you have to be willing to put up with a few drawbacks, for instance, social breakdown, drug addiction, suicide, mental illness, and so on and so on. These are kind of just things you have to put up with if you're going to develop the country. And development is what? Development is GDP. And so who decides that? Who was it? Was this a democratic decision to decide that we're going to restrict the use of the word progress and development to increase in GDP? Where did that come from? It's another kind of religious orthodoxy that's been adopted. So as Buddhists, my suggestion is we don't buy into that idea that that you have a choice between stimulating greed and producing meaningful, constructive activity in the society, development, progress, or you just sit around doing nothing, sleeping and just eating the fruit off the trees, and like people thousands of years ago. We say, well, the idea is that we educate people and try to develop a society in which we are, as far as possible, channeling the power of desire into chanda and away from tanha. So it's not, we're not rejecting desire and will to do as such, but we're saying if it becomes tanha, becomes craving, then the ill effects that arise are actually not worth it. So at the beginning I said, well, let's approach this from controversial point of view. There's no world economic crisis. So one of the reasons why that could possibly be a reasonable or rational statement is that over half of the world's population are in perpetual crisis, living on $1 a day or less, no sanitation, and so on. But another dimension to this is, and this isn't news to most of us, I think that it's generally agreed that the current economic system is unsustainable, and human beings have lived in the world now for, I don't know, 1 million or something more years, but after hundreds of thousands of years of living in obscurity and in a very simple way, have, since the Industrial Revolution in the mid-18th century, within the space of less than 300 years, have now made further life on this planet highly questionable. So with global warming, with all the environmental destruction that has come from economic human activities of various kinds, we now face the possibility of the end of human history. So we also need to look at economic, social development over the past 300 years in terms of that much larger frame, in terms of human history, and look at all the wonderful things that have been developed in the world of the past 300 years through technology and science and so on, but seen also in terms of the effect on the planet and on the effect on the human race. And maybe it's not such a wonderful thing after all, if it's seen in that light, in that context. So we say even in the period before what we now call the world economic crisis, where everything's going wonderfully, the economy's growing and so on, but in long-term picture, 1,000-year picture, 10,000-year picture, this is a crisis also. This is a crisis for the planet, it's a crisis for the human race, but it's a crisis which is not sort of right in your face, moment by moment. You think, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to, is my company going to go bankrupt or something? But it's a more insidious crisis because it's one that people are heedless about and don't recognize as a crisis. So my my original thesis, let's look, well, maybe it's not just a crisis, it's an opportunity, it's a wake-up call, it's a time to reassess our priorities and what we really want to do with our life. One criticism I would make of the economic system, and or not confined or restricted to that. I'm reminded of the words of Albert Einstein some 50 years ago or whenever. He said that human beings have become, I can't remember the exact quote, you have to forgive me, but that we've developed incredibly in terms of means, but we haven't developed at all in terms of ends. So economic matters are surely means to an end. But for many of us in the world, the economy has become the end. So everything is for the economy. So human beings, lives of human beings are for the economy. And so a lot of the education system has been co-opted to be a system to create people to fit into the economy. And children should learn this and learn that because this is what the economy needs. So again, it's like the economy is higher than the individual and the child. It's our job to contribute to the economy. But that makes the economy into God, doesn't it? I mean, the economy is a means. It's not the end in itself. When I was a boy in the school, we had a ruler, like a line on the wall, and at that age, where you're growing quite quickly, and you also run into this classroom and see how tall you are and whether you've grown anything in the summer holidays or something, and if you grow more than your friend, I grew an inch, you only grew half an inch, and I often thought about this when you hear countries, sort of, our economy grew by 7%, your economy only grew by 5%. It's just like kids, I grew by an inch, you only grew by half an inch. I mean, is that really, what is that an indication of, the growth of an economy? Surely it's not an end in itself. It's not a proof of success in itself. So as Buddhists, we need to come back. What kind of society do we want to live in? What kind of world do we want to create for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren? And is our economic model and our way of living together consistent with that? Are we confident that the kind of values that we are promoting, the way that we live our lives, the form, the structure of society is generally set up in such a way that it is leading towards those long-term goals that we have for families and for societies and for the world at large. So surely that we should be looking at the economy in terms of what it's doing and how it relates to the higher goals of life, rather than assuming all the higher goals of life and saying, well, yeah, that's very good, but just, it's not very economic, or it's not, well, if we did that, consumption would fall, and what would we do then? If people didn't consume so much, the economy wouldn't grow anymore, So it's all coming from this basic kind of belief system or view of the world that the economy comes first. So I think that as Buddhists, we really need to be coming back to realities, not ideas about things, but really grounding ourselves in the truths. And this means taking time to close your eyes and look at the real world. When you open your eyes, this is not the real world. It's completely opposite to what people think. You close your eyes and you're in yourself in the dream world. This is the real world. This is how you get to look at what's really going on, and the nature of pleasure and pain and happiness and unhappiness and suffering and the end of suffering. This is something that we can find some real grounding for by looking at experience. So Buddhism is not a philosophy. It's not a belief system, as I said. But the teachings of the Buddha are articulations of truths that we can recognize in our minds, and we begin to see some things, that we made such a big deal out of. It's just really nothing, and other things that we've put aside and sort of looked as very unimportant, and actually they're really big issues. So that sort of reassessment or recognizing what's going on and reprioritizing our goals, that really starts to take place when we're willing to look very closely at our lives. And we begin to see that so much of what's going on and is praised and is given importance, it's just so trivial and silly. So one thing I think we have to be very careful about is avoiding this whole kind of should and shouldn't attitude to life. So I should be, I'm a Buddhist, or I'm a this, I'm that, therefore I should be this way, and I shouldn't be that way. Because it becomes very false, and you begin to setting up ideas about how you should be, and then you have to be always afraid of losing face and not appearing how you'd like to appear to other people. So look at yourself and see whether you're in that kind of should and should be kind of frame of mind, and what that does to the wholesome dhammas and the unwholesome dhammas in your mind. I find it's very unhelpful. But then, some people say, just be yourself. You should, but then it becomes, you should just be yourself. You should just be spontaneous. But, if someone say, just be spontaneous, can you do it? Just be yourself. What does that mean? I'll tell you an anecdote that's quite amusing. Some 20 years ago, I don't know how many years ago now, there was this big concert, Live Aid concert for Africa, I think, and they made a song. Some of the older people will remember this song called "We Are the World," and one of the people who was invited to sing this song was Bob Dylan. Do you ever know who Bob Dylan is? And so he was at this meeting with all these other singers and great performers, and he felt very insecure, and he says, I just don't know how I'm going to sing my bit, I just don't know how to do it here. And the person who was sitting there with him was another famous singer called Stevie Wonder. Do you know who Stevie Wonder is? And Stevie Wonder said to Bob Dylan, Bob, just sing it, just be Bob Dylan, just sing it like you're Bob Dylan. And he said, well, that's it. I don't know. What's that like? What's it like to be Bob Dylan? So Stevie Wonder sat down at his piano and did this incredible Bob Dylan impersonation. And Bob Dylan said, so Bob Dylan copied Stevie Wonder's impersonation of Bob Dylan on that song, and everybody said it was great. I actually haven't heard this, but I read about this. But so this idea of, who are you really? So like Bob Dylan had to have somebody else's interpretation of who he was before he had some kind of confidence to be who he was. So be spontaneous. You should be this way. You should be that way. It's just like this. It's the way it is. And I think the important thing is to be more interested in learning from experience and not deciding beforehand and not having any idea or any fixed idea of how you should appear to other people, who you are, but to be very honest with what's going on and learning, and particularly taking these kusala dhammas and akusala dhammas as your standard. This is a teaching that the Buddha gave to us, and it seems a very simple, down-to-earth, basic teaching, but it's absolutely invaluable in everyday life. Buddha said, in any kind of situation, kind of relationship, you're always asking yourself, do I see through this association, relationship, endeavor, process, do I see kusala dhammas increasing and akusala dhammas decreasing, or the opposite, akusala dhammas increasing and kusala dhammas decreasing? If you see the former, then mindfully give yourself to that particular relationship process. If you see the latter, then you need to do something about it, or to withdraw if that should be necessary. So there is a basis and a compass needle that is there within us when we become more sensitive to what is a wholesome Dhamma, what is an unwholesome Dhamma. Again, these are not philosophical terms, but these are ways of pointing to realities. So by looking within, you start to become more sensitive. What is greed in the mind? What is aversion? What is jealousy? What is laziness? What is guilt? What is confusion? What is fear? What is kindness? What is patience? And so on and so forth. And again, the mistake that you don't want to make is to assume ownership of those qualities. You say, well, if you say, oh, I'm such a bad person, everybody thinks I'm a meditator and a really good person, but actually I'm really bad. I've got all these really nasty thoughts in my mind, and good job, nobody knows what I'm really like, Now that may seem like humility, but it's delusion. And often notice, I think quite common for good, generally people who are endeavoring to lead good lives, to give too much weight and importance to the unwholesome dhammas that arise in their mind. So you can have let's say, you think of doing something kind for somebody else, or and you don't want any kind of recognition for it, any kind of praise. You don't even need anybody to know about it at all. And you put yourself out. You maybe spend money or time, effort, and then within the course of this very wholesome effort taking place over perhaps hours or even days, maybe you just have one or two little thoughts just pop up into your mind, but I bet they'll find out anyway, and everybody's going to really praise me, and just kind of just this frisson, there's just this moment of wow, everybody's going to really think I'm wonderful. And then what can often happen is you grasp onto that unwholesome thought, and you say, yeah, this is who I really am. This is me really. All that other good stuff, that's just kidding myself. Who I really am is this. And this is a sort of the predominant psychological trait of Westerners. So perhaps as Malaysians, you may have avoided that kind of trap, but it's very, very common with people in Western countries to think like that, to think, whether it's the result of teachings of original sin and other things, not so sure, but this idea that unwholesome dhammas and nasty thoughts are more real, and who you really are than the wholesome ones. And when in fact it's just maybe just the duration of that thought may just be a second, or just a few seconds. So what you want to be doing is being able to see wholesome dhammas as wholesome dhammas and unwholesome dhammas as unwholesome dhammas, and you have a wonderfully kind, wise thought or whatever, and that doesn't mean that you're a wonderful person or you're a wise person. You have a thought of anxiety, it doesn't mean you're an anxious person. You have a fearful thought, doesn't mean you're a fearful. You don't have to add on that person bit. Just see this as just the flow of life, as things arising and passing away according to causes and conditions. And this ability and this interest in seeing how things arise and pass away according to causes and conditions is what really leads to wisdom. There's again, I'm reminded of something I read not so long ago. Someone was talking about it was a criticism of American society, actually. Someone was saying that one of the most pernicious thoughts and ways of looking at life that he found in society in which he lived is that when people have different experiences, they say it all happened for a reason. And I read this and I was immediately, well, that's actually quite good, And I was thinking it was like the Buddhist idea, that everything that happens because there's a cause or a condition. But what he actually was referring to was that many people in that culture have a view that there is this kind of hidden plan of life, which ordinary human beings are not capable of really understanding. But you just have to have the faith that when something bad happens, it's all part of this big plan that God has for you. So you just have to be so in a way, it can be quite skillful as a means of removing suffering, but it's not a wisdom practice by any means. So in Buddhism, rather than saying whatever happens is part of a cosmic plan which God has lined up for me, which will have in the end a happy ending, we say whatever happens is due to causes and conditions. What are the causes and conditions? What causes and conditions are susceptible to immediate remedies? Is that what can I do? And what should I do first? What should I do later? With what things do I need to be patient with? Because, in words of Shakespeare, ripeness is all. Many people lack that awareness that wise, intelligent, good actions will only have the desirable results when we have that sensitivity to time and place. Now, if you have some really good advice for somebody, which has come from a very compassionate place in your heart, but you tell somebody when they're very angry or offended with you, they can't hear what you're saying. And you've wasted those words, because if you've spoken those words at a time when that person is not ready to take them in, it's very hard to repeat them at a later time. And some people, because they lack that sensitivity, which really comes again through mindfulness and meditation more than anything else, then feel downhearted. I had such good intentions. All I want to do is to help other people and to make people happy. And this is what happens. People just throw it back in my face. There's no appreciation, and often it's because we lack that awareness of the importance of timeliness. When to be patient. When is the right time to speak? When is the right time to be silent? When is the right time to be a leader? When is the right time to be a follower? You see, there's no holy book that's going to tell you these things. There's no 10-point plan. This comes through looking and becoming sensitive to, listening to what's going on in your body and mind. And so the theories and the concepts come second. It's experience that comes first. And so we have to be constantly verifying these things. And through experience, certain values start to, not because we think we should have this value, but it becomes just common sense or natural. I mean, if you, for instance, you go to live in a monastery or a meditation center, let's say a monastery. In the monastery in which I was the abbot for a number of years, we have guests from around the world who come to practice, and people who come to stay in the monastery are expected to follow the monastic schedule, which means getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 chanting, and then meditation through till dawn, and then often walking off with following the monks on alms round or sweeping, and then there's only eating one meal a day, and not getting to bed again till not earlier than 10 o'clock at night. So sleeping on the floor, on a hard floor, eating one meal a day, and so on. And you'd be surprised how easy it is. If you've never done it, you'd think, wow, it's impossible, I couldn't do that. But you can, really. And I say that because I've 30 years, I've seen, I don't know how many hundreds of people who found that they can do that quite easily. And one of the values of it is, if you've lived in a simple hut in a jungle, sleeping on a hard wooden floor, sleeping only maybe 5 hours, 6 hours a day, eating only one meal a day, and so on, and you found that you can do that and actually be happy, then coming back to your normal life, then hopefully, if you're reflective, your attitude to the luxuries in your home has changed somewhat. It doesn't mean you have to be super ascetic. Okay, I'm going to sleep on the floor now for the rest of my life, or no evening meal. There are very few people who think I wouldn't encourage it either. But it does mean that you have that memory, yeah, it's nice to have a soft bed and, have this and have that. But if I didn't have it, I'd be all right. I know I'd be all right because I've been all right already. I've lived without these things, and not only was it not miserable, it was actually one of the most kind of untrammeled, unworried, blissful kind of time that I've experienced. So this, I think, is very useful when there's an economic crisis and there's so much worry. Well, what happened if got laid off work, or this happened or that happened? Well, if you have that experience of what you really need to live, and to know living very simply is not it's not a deprived life. In fact, it can be quite the opposite. It's a very full and rich life, because you're much more aware of the causes and conditions for happiness, rather than assuming that and believing the advertisements and all the propaganda that you have to have this, you have to be this way in order to be happy. And now you have the proof through your own experience. It's not so. It's not true. And so, yeah, you don't want to lose your job. You don't want a reduction in your wage. Of course not. You want to live your life on the way that suits you, and you have family and dependents to look on. But at the back of your mind, well, if the worst came to the worst, it wouldn't be so bad. And I think that's something that as Buddhists we should be able to depend on. One other, I think it's probably it's the end of the talk, but one point again, part of meditation is, it's not just like all or nothing. Some people say, oh, I'm a hopeless meditator. I've meditated and I've never been peaceful. I've never got really blissed out in jhana. I'm hopeless. Now, this is a wrong idea of what meditation's about. Whatever, if you meditate sincerely, you're always learning. If you're not learning about the nature of bliss and the nature of peace, you're learning about the nature of confusion and agitation and sleepiness and all these things. And that's not something to be denigrated. There's really important things that need to be learnt, and very patiently finding skillful means to deal with those things. And one of the important objects of study is, the thinking process, and particularly anxiety and worry. So it's, right now, it's not, we're not suffering so much, I would think, probably right now, particularly here, from the world economic crisis. But if there is suffering, it's worry about the economic crisis. So understanding the nature of worry and the obsessive nature of thought, what if that happened, what, and then what if that, and creating these whole kind of worlds of imagination out of the simple what if, and so I'm not advocating you say, don't worry, you shouldn't worry, just let go, It's not possible, to adopt this kind of stance. You say, I'm a Buddhist, I don't worry, why worry? But what we are interested in is looking at worry and being sensitive to the arising of worry. And just noticing, oh, here comes worry again. This is worry. Oh yeah, look, this is the way that worry works. And this is what worry feeds on. This is how worry waxes. This is how worry wanes. This is how worry ceases. And you realize that, you don't have to be, you have to be buffeted and completely overthrown by worry. If you don't look at your mind and you're not, it's like, life is like you're just this little flimsy boat on this kind of stormy sea. But then when you look inside more and more, you see actually you're the sea and the mental state, the worry, is the little boat. You see? So same scenario, flimsy boat on a stormy sea, but you're the sea rather than the boat. And that's a very different feeling, And the choppy water is only on the top. Underneath the choppy water, it's still. So there's, I've been here before, and in other places, I've said that my teacher and myself, want to get away from this whole kind of samatha vipassana dichotomy, and there's, that's just samatha, or I want to do vipassana, or I don't want to vipassana, so samatha. It's just Dhamma practice, and there's a samatha dimension, there's a vipassana dimension to Dhamma practice. But part of looking and trying to be mindful and aware of the breath, for instance, illuminates all the ways in which you are distracted and all the negative, and you can call that samatha if you like, but you're getting a lot of understanding and information about the way your mind works, which will stand you in good stead in daily life. But also, I think that the peaceful mind sees clearly, and the values and the inspiration and the willingness to let go of trivialities for things that lead to peace becomes a much more powerful force in your life. You see, it's not a matter of you should, this is really great, but it's the world, it's dukkha. I shouldn't have this, because I'm Buddhist and I'm meditating for nibbana. But as long as you see this is really, really interesting, really, really delicious, but no, that's Puritanism. That's not Buddhism, But the Buddhist attitude is this really so wonderful? Is it really so delicious? Is it really? Yeah, and the more you look at it, actually it's not. So you put it down, not because you think you should, but because it's not what you thought it was. Now, otherwise, it's like, you probably heard of these scientific experiments where they get rats or some kind of animal and have a maze, and then they put some kind of food at the end of the maze, and then ring a bell or something, and the rat finds its way through the maze, and it eats, let's say it's cheese, eats the cheese. And then, over the course of time, they get better and quicker at this. And then the very cruel scientist takes away the cheese, and then they want to see how many times will the rat just keep going through the maze in the hope that there'll be a piece of cheese. You know, first time it goes through the maze, where's the cheese? You know, what's happening? Maybe he's late, you know, or something, you know, until, no. And so then he comes back a bit later, and he comes again and again, until after a certain number of times, he gives up. There's going to be no more cheese. So in this respect, we could say rats are much more intelligent than human beings, because they have the memory of the cheese, you know, which encourages them to keep going through the maze on the off chance that there will be cheese there again. Human beings have never had cheese in the first place, but they still go through the maze every day, hoping that one day there will be cheese. So at least the rat has the memory of the cheese, but human beings are putting forth great effort, suffering a lot unnecessarily, because the things that they're chasing are not what they think they are, and don't provide the results and the happiness that they expect they will. This is the thesis. This is Buddhist thesis, and saying, is that the case? So it's not saying you should believe this because we're Buddhists. It's saying take this away and look at your own experience and the experience of people that around you and in the society, and put it to the test, because this is the Ehipassiko Dhamma. It stands up to testing, the most rigorous testing. You doubt, you don't believe it, fine, that's no problem at all, but put it to the test. And my own experience, and I think experience of the other venerables here, and all of you really devoted yourself to Dhamma practice, yes, the Dhamma does stand up to testing. You know, I don't find a single Dhamma teaching which has crumbled under investigation. Quite the opposite. The more you investigate the Dhamma, the clearer it becomes. And this is, by the way, a very good test of how true something is. If something is actually illusory, it is not real, the closer, the more you look at it, the more it disappears, more insubstantial it becomes. But something that's real, the more you look at it, the more time you spend, the more investigation, the clearer it becomes. And I feel that the Dhamma is, you know, the example of something. The clearer and clearer, the more attention, the more effort, the more interest, the clearer it becomes, the stronger the faith becomes, stronger the faith becomes, stronger the effort becomes, stronger the effort becomes, stronger the mindfulness, stronger the mindfulness, stronger the samadhi, stronger the samadhi, stronger the wisdom. So may all of you experience those 5 spiritual faculties and 5 spiritual powers through the power of Dhamma. And I think I would like to end the talk at this point.
Alright, thank you Ajahn again for the wonderful talk. Now I'd like to open the floor to questions. Is there any questions from the floor?
More on the level of offering food to the monks. This is this group of monks say, for instance, if you were to if you were to give me ice cream every day, or give his monks ice cream every day, you get an ice cream ring, you see. Yes, exactly. I would agree with you. And this is, a big issue in Thai Buddhism at the moment, that there are, the Thai Sangha is very large, and there are very many different kinds of monks in Thailand, but this particular group are very powerful and very wealthy, and the teachings like this are obviously in conflict with the teachings of the Lord Buddha, and
sect of Buddhism, which, with due respect to the Sangha should have the conviction to put things right, so that they people don't get misled.
Yes, this is very, very nice that you should say that, because it reflects the point I made just now. You say the Sangha should do something about it. You see? Yeah, I don't think there's any question about what the Sangha should do, but the question is, are the whole causes and conditions, supporting conditions there for the Sangha to do anything or not? And unfortunately, they're not. So, and probably too much to go into the situation, but the power and the financial muscle of this group is so strong that it's very difficult for the governing body to do anything about it at the moment. But I think my intention was rather than to take an example from another religious tradition, which would be very easy. I was just saying, well, don't be too sure that we don't have this kind of aberrations within our own tradition. Because if you don't understand the nature of belief and blind faith, it can arise anywhere, even in the most apparently kind of rational or reasonable kinds of environments. It's very important to understand how that arises, why people can be so caught by that kind of teaching, what is going on there, because it's only through understanding the psychological needs and the ways that they're manipulated and finding ways to protect ourselves from this, that we can do anything about this phenomena, which is a huge phenomena in society at the moment, particularly in some of the other major religious traditions, in which we don't have this wisdom teaching to be able to say, look, this isn't correct.
Ajahn, you mentioned that governments should treat the economy as a means to the end rather than an end in itself. So, may I know, is there any Buddhist country in this world that places importance on the economy as a means rather than an end? And what is the effect on the people's livelihood?
Yes, well, I haven't been there now for a number of years, but the one country that I'm aware of is Bhutan, and the king of Bhutan is famous for this concept of gross national happiness rather than gross national product. So yes, that he certainly and his advisors do have that concept. Now, to what extent he's been successful in that, I don't have any first-hand experience, but I think very, very kind of interesting. One leading Thai academic, great monk, not just an academic, has said that in Buddhist idea we would judge the success of an economy not by the number of rich people, but by the number of poor people. So if you had an economy where few rich people and many poor people, obviously everyone would agree that would be, an unsuccessful economy. But he said, if you have a lot of rich people, but a lot of poor people, then that would also be an unsuccessful economy in Buddhist terms. So we have this idea of the four requisites, which are the four basic requirements for human survival, which is clothing, adequate food, housing, and medicines in time of sickness. And so I would say that a Buddhist country, a Buddhist economy would be one in which aimed that everybody in the country should have access to the four requisites as the starting point for the economy. And in fact, there's very few economies in the world that, in America, for instance, the healthcare system is an absolute scandal, and poor people in America live in constant dread that they're going to get ill and have to go to hospital because there's a large number of people don't have health insurance, and if you're in hospital and you get something seriously wrong with you, you can find a bill of many tens of thousands of pounds and have to sell your house, or it's your whole life wiped out through illness. And so the richest country in the world has not made a goal of providing everyone in the country with the four requisites. So in that case, I would say from this monk, my point of view also, that it's an unsuccessful economy, even though the standard of living, material standard of living, is very high, generally speaking. Yes. There's no. Yes. 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 Well, it's tough, isn't it? Because countries now are not independent. Governments are not so powerful as they used to be. One modern thinker has coined this term, the virtual parliament or virtual government, and what he's referring to is whether it's transnational companies or hedge funds or whatever, which can have great power over individual governments because they vote. If your government starts to change its policies, they attack your currency as the most violent means, or withdraw their investment, move to another country. So people who have absolutely no rights in terms of they're not members, they don't belong in that country, they're not nationals of that country, they don't have any allegiance to that country, but they have incredible power over policy making because of their economic clout. So it's not just these days a matter of changing governments, because even if a government wanted to change and become more moderate, I don't think that that they would be able to, because of the overall system in which we're part of now. So I'm not an expert on that. I keep saying I'm not, speaking as a monk here and from my limited perspective and understanding of these matters, but that seems to me a real difficulty. And I think that in a way it's just a matter of look, with global warming and everything, basically we can't go on like this anyway. And a lot of ideas that seem really radical now in terms of moderation of consumption and so on, which would be unacceptable, are just going to be common sense in 5-10 years' time. So I think as Buddhists, it's just a matter of preparing for. I think it'd be easier for us, because, as I say, if we have this grounding in practice and knowing how to differentiate between needs and wants and really what really does cause happiness and what doesn't, what just seems to, and in fact just spins the mind out, and between what are authentic values and what are false values. These kinds of things we're constantly looking at in our day-to-day life, which means that I think as Buddhists we're always saying, well, we don't know, and there's no way of knowing how things are going to change in the future, and there's no way we can control that. But we do have a confidence that with a practice of Dhamma, we will be prepared to deal with it. You have that confidence. Yeah, I'll be able to deal with it, whatever happens. So, in terms of policymakers, I don't know. It's tough because it seems to me that the moment that economy starts to shrink, the first thing is how can we persuade people to consume in order to get things back up and running again. So it's the direct opposite to what we would think would be the wisest choice.
Surrender, see it to accept that is karma or something like that, or there's one say a mantra to clear the mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, as Buddhists, I mean, I think that adopting some kind of belief system in order just to escape from mental conflict is basically the sort of drug approach. It's just a drug to make you feel better temporarily, and I don't think that in the long run it's the best means of dealing with suffering. What rather than a sort of a comforting assumption or idea as a way of suppressing pain, I would say that yes, karma is the way things are, and this has happened through because of causes and conditions that have led up to it. It's just this way because the causes and conditions have led up. That doesn't sound very comforting, but believe me, if you reflect on it enough, it is to see just the way things. Everything is in that way. It's perfect. It's not perfect in the sense that it's perfectly what you want, for sure. But it's the perfect or the only outcome given all the mass of the whole complex system of causes and conditions that have led up to this. So that's in terms of why this has happened. So I'll often say, why me? This is the anguish. Then immediately you say, well, why not me? Why not? It's hard to answer, isn't it? But the teaching that I would say, not looking at sort of teachings just to sort of suppress things, but wisdom teachings that also are comforting. And the most important one is this sense of complete fluidity and uncertainty and the unpredictability of life. Now, when you get very depressed about something, then everything becomes very solid and sure. Then this is the nature of like craving and deluded mental states. Everything's so sure. It's a complete mess. It's terrible. My child's education is up the spout. I've got no job. Everything's gone. Oh dear, it's just terrible. It's awful. And these words are just reinforcing this emotion, and it becomes to seem more and more and more real. But with that simple thing, it's not sure. And look at all the things that have happened in your life before, which have seemed so sure, and then they turned out to be completely different. How many things actually turn out the way they think they are going to turn out? And so often, some to use the cliche, one door closes and another door opens. And it's a matter of having that kind of readiness to say, well, rather than just sitting around feeling sorry for myself and just regretting all the dreams that I had for the future, which are maybe not going to work out, maybe they will in another way. Given that things are like this, what's the best way forward now? And first and most immediate and practical thing is you have to take some responsibility for your mind, okay? Your job, your work, these things are out of your control. But you don't have to spend your night worrying and thinking and getting more and more tense and upset about them. There's no external pressure on you to just lay awake at night just worrying about the future. And to see that that's actually the most harmful thing that you can do, because it's the mind which is mindful and present, which is creative and can find new ways forward. When one door opens, it's the mind with mindfulness that can say, well, actually, that door's closed, but this one's open. But if with a very anxious or depressed mind, you're just looking at this door that's closed like this. Oh, it's closed, and I can't go. I can't. I want to go through this door, and I can't. And why has this happened to me? And just over here, there's an open door, and you can't see it because you're just completely fixated on the door that's closed. So this is why mindfulness practice and meditation, is practical. It's re-establishing your mind in this clarity and flexibility, not allowing the mind to become too stiff and rigid and fixed. They think, it's not so bad, You just say, well, look, have you got a roof over your head? Well, yes, still do. Did you get anything to eat this morning? Yeah, I've got something to eat. There's some food in the larder, Or again, these are cliche, count your blessings. Do that as a meditation practice. Count your blessings every day. Your family, your friends, all the things that you value in your life which have not disappeared through the economic crisis. If you all the things that are still in your life that are most valuable and give you happiness in your life, and compare with the things that are no longer there, I would say the things that make you happy far outnumber than the things that have been lost. So it's not a matter of suppression or repression or wishful thinking, but a matter of looking, developing the mind's ability to be present to experience and to remember things changing all the time. You just don't know. Just suddenly out of the blue, something happens. And I certainly have a faith in barami and accumulated goodness, that it does create causes and conditions for good things to happen in life. Do you understand? If you've been constantly living a good life, being kind and honest and so on and so forth, then there's a power of goodness there which creates. It's not a power from outside, grace of God. It's something that you've created within yourself. You've done a lot of good things and kind things and helped other people, and there comes a point where that ripens, and then people come forward and help you. And I mean, I've seen that many times in my life. So that's also, if you want something that's hope. And I think, as a general appeal to all of us, as Buddhists, as a Buddhist community, when there's a public address, we use these words, uncles and aunties and brother and sister. Don't let those be empty terms. Really try to, these are aunties and uncles and aunties and brothers and sisters. And if we know one of us is going through some difficult time, and there's some way we can help, maybe it's not financially, but just spending some time and offering some sympathy and some kindness can make a big difference to people going through hard times. And this is very much part of our practice as Buddhism as well, giving support, kindness, helping each other out in times of difficulty. So that sense, and I think if anything that I would see from Christian communities, and that's something that I do admire, that sense of support and community that they're able to develop, and that's not exclusive to faith-based groups. It's something as Buddhists that we should all be striving to develop too. Yes, well, that I would quarrel with your use of the term "the real world," by the way, but I don't think it's the real world. But I understand that often as a lay Buddhist, the people around you who you love and respect perhaps don't share the same vision and the same values, even people in your own family, and that's something also to respect and understand. That we can't sort of impose one's own wisdom on, can't impose wisdom on somebody else. But I think what we can say, and as I've just been saying now, so look, what's the use of sitting around and crying over spilt milk? It's like this, and so how can we make the best of it? Do we really have to feel so bad about it? Is it not possible that we can find some happiness within this? Sometimes through having to economize and things, we can find new kinds of happiness, new sources of happiness, and I think most of us have some kind of memories that we can draw upon, and that when speaking with children or with other family members, times you've gone on holiday, or you're just walking out in the forest, for instance, or times where you've not been sort of plugged into internets and iPods and all these things, but actually had a really good time. And they say, look, do you remember when we went off to the seaside or in the countryside, or that time when we were just living, and what a wonderful time we had, or when we were that period when I didn't have such a good job, I didn't have so much money, and we didn't have any of the comforts that we have, and yet we weren't really unhappy because we had each other, and and in the end, that's look, really, what is it which sometimes you can do it in terms of like a chart, 100%. In your sense of well-being in your life, what does it rely on? 100%. How much is your happiness is dependent on things outside of yourself? How many percent inside of yourself? What are actually you can see as the causal factors? I think that as meditators, you can find that the internal factors become stronger and stronger to the extent that you think, well, it's like 90% internal, to the extent you're pretty well indifferent to where you go and who you and what you're doing outside, and that's something which you carry with you. But obviously, people who are not meditating, not practicing, then the external things are much stronger. But even so, you can point, I think, to the importance of the inner fact. You say, look, suppose you were to go to this really expensive resort by the side of the ocean, 5-star resort, incredibly lush, and so on. And then, you had an argument and you're just really angry with each other. How much would you enjoy that resort if you were you're just so angry you couldn't speak to each other, not talking to each other? All those wonderful things would still be there, the surf and the sun and the food and everything, but it would be meaningless. And similarly, if you can be in a very ugly kind of place, but just that sense of rapport and love and kindness is so strong that suddenly that place becomes transformed, and it can be a place that you remember ever afterwards with really warm feelings, because it was a place where something really wonderful happened with somebody or with in some situation. So these kinds of examples, I think, are not so difficult to remember and to draw upon, and can talk in very kind of basic normal terms, but pointing to this simple truth that ultimately what defines your happiness is your mind, and that those things external to you play a part. Not to say that they're meaningless, but that the heart and the mind are more important, and that sometimes when we have difficulties on the external level, we don't have to necessarily suffer so much, because what we do have, what we can take responsibility for, and what we do have the capacity, we can create happiness from within ourselves. One of the a book I'd recommend. I don't know if anybody's read this book. It's a really fascinating book, and it won a prize a couple of years ago. It's called Stumbling Upon Happiness. Has anybody heard of this book? It's written by a professor in Harvard, I think. I can't remember his name now. Stumbling on Happiness. Anyway, he gathers a lot of research about the brain and the mind and happiness and suffering, and some of the research is quite stunning. For instance, they interviewed people who had a terrible accident and were paraplegic, and they found that after the initial shock of being completely paralyzed from the head downwards, that people returned to their basic happiness level they had before they were disabled. It's like people have a base level of happiness, and some very extreme circumstance, like winning the lottery, or on the negative side, having a terrible accident and being permanently disfigured, creates this kind of blip like this, which lasts for maybe 3 months or 6 months. But within a year, incredibly, people are more or less back to where they were in their happiness level. And that you would look at somebody, you think it'd be terrible, to be laid up in the rest of your life, or paralyzed from their neck down. But most people say subjectively they're quite happy, and people who win huge amounts of money, after a while it just levels out again. So this is a example of it. Is so many things in life are just not what you think they will be beforehand, that it's just so unsure what's going to happen, and that sense of uncertainty and fluidity, I think, is something to keep coming back to.